This morning is from the Gospel of John, chapter 6. And I will be reading verses 1 through 15. Hear the word of the Lord. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. Once one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves, left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force and to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. May God grant us his understanding of these words this day. You may be seated. So this is an interesting story, and it's one of the few that are in all 4 Gospels. And so given that, I thought maybe we should take notice of what's happening there. Sarah, can you put up the map for us, please? And we've been kind of traveling around with Jesus on the way to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. And so we are back on the Sea of Galilee. David, can you kind of point out over there where we're going to be?
So this on the right is the inset on the left. You see the square up there. So the Sea of Tiberias, are also known as the Sea of Galilee. And this is near Bethsaida, where we were just a few weeks ago for the blind man. And so we're on that side of the sea, getting ready to do what Jesus is about to do.
Right. Okay, so that kind of gives us some orientation of where we are in our journey. And so let's explore this story just a little bit. So let's say that you were given the task of feeding 5,000 people. Well, actually 5,000 men and their families, so give or take a few, maybe 8,000? Because when they count them, they count the men, and that was a cultural thing at that time. So when I think about feeding 8,000 people, it boggles my mind. The cooking, all of that stuff, plus the cost of feeding them. Let's say we were just going to feed them rice and beans and maybe a roll on the side. And, of course, in our world, we have to have paper plates and cups and, those kind of things for our rice and beans. And so probably if we figured it at being about $3 a person, anyone want to do the math? How much money would it take to feed 8,000 people at $3 a person?
94,000.
$24,000. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't have $24,000 sitting in my pocket. Oh, and that was just the cost of the food. I didn't pay the cooks. Just paid for the food. So, it boggles our mind. So let's look a little bit into the story and kind of think about the multitude of people. I mean, I did that so you can see the picture of how many people were there. John tells us that the disciples had crossed over from the far side of the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias. We are not sure what they were doing or why they decided to cross the lake, but maybe they crossed over to try to get away from the crowds a bit, to have a little peace. I mean, that's it's not written right there, but they've been doing a lot of things. And maybe they just needed a break. And maybe Jesus had something else in mind. We don't know. They tell us that there was a crowd following them because the crowd had seen the signs that Jesus had done, the people that he had healed, and I'm sure that there were other things, casting out demons and raising the dead, and all those things that he had done. And the people had decided, hey, this guy is pretty cool. Let's follow him. It might be that the crowd kind of thought of him as the David Copperfield of that day. They wanted to see what he could do next. Jesus didn't make a 747 disappear or an elephant disappear, but he'd been doing some pretty good things, making the sickness disappear and healing people of their infirmities and things like that. And so they wanted to see this man who made the lame to walk and the blind to see. Jesus knew that the people were following him not for who he was, but for what he could do. Let's assume that Jesus and the apostles were trying to escape and get a little peace from the crowds. In order to do that, they decided now to cross the lake, and they arrived, and there's everyone there. It had been a long day, and it was late in the afternoon, and people were hungry. And not just the people in the crowd, but Jesus and the disciples, I would venture to say, were hungry as well. So, Jesus called Philip over and asked him a question. And the scripture tells us that he was trying to teach Philip something. Now, granted, there was no McDonald's close or Burger King or Chinese takeout. It'd be a challenge. And one of the first things he said is, we don't have that kind of money. We don't have that. What are we going to do? So I think there was something that Jesus wanted to teach. There always is. It was kind of logical for him to call Philip because Philip was from Bethsaida, which was 8 or 9 miles north of where they were. We saw it on the map. And, he would kind of have the idea where to get food if there was anything he had, but he was dumbfounded. Philip had no idea how to feed that many people. But Jesus had a plan, I think. He kind of knew what he was doing. He wanted Philip in a place where his faith could grow. He wanted the disciples in a place where their faith could grow. And he wanted the people in a place where their faith could grow. So along comes Andrew. He was standing close by, and he heard this exchange, and Andrew was a fix-it person. Did you guys know that? Andrew was a fix-it person. He figured things out. And so Andrew, being Andrew, looked around and tried to find out what was there. And it said that Andrew finds this little boy. And he said, there's a kid over here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Now, that's not going to help with all these people. We're talking 5 and 2. And the barley was the poor people's grain, It wasn't what the rich people would eat. In fact, the rich people used barley to feed their animals. So barley was kind of, I'm not sure what we can compare it, Dale bread perhaps today? I mean, it was this thing, and the fish, you know, I always like to think fish, but we're talking a little boy's lunch. And it wasn't this size of a fish. One commentator that I read said it was like a sardine. That the family wouldn't have sent the little boy out with a fish that could feed more than one person. So, say 2 of them. We're talking little fish. Little fish. Well, that was an ordinary lunch that little boy had. Ordinary for the poor people. And to top it off, he was just a young boy. It doesn't tell us how old he is. But I'm guessing maybe 8 or 9 in order for him to go off with the crowds on this one. I'm not really sure because I'm not that familiar with the culture to know what was the norm, what was okay. I mean, I would have trouble sending my 8-year-old off for the day, but, you know, it was a different place. I don't think it was a coincidence that the boy and the lunch are part of the story. Because I think it has something to speak into our lives. That it was a boy, and it was a lunch, and 5 barley loaves and 2 tiny fish. Because so often we think that God uses multi-talented great people and special props and items to do good. You know, the faith healing shows of years ago had a lot of props and glitter. I think sometimes we think when God is doing miracles, when things are happening, that it's that kind of a great, grandiose thing. But in this case, it was not so. There was a young boy, 5 loaves, and 2 tiny fish. So when the lunch is brought to Jesus, he does what Jesus does. He gave thanks for these 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, he gave thanks before they fed the multitude. I think that says something to us. He gave thanks for what was there. In fact, the little boy did what he could. And it was enough. And all were fed. I love this story because it tells me that whatever I bring to God is enough. Even when society is telling me that I need to be more and do more and have more, God's saying, Shari, you have enough, and what you bring to me is enough. Sometimes we need to be reminded that what we have to give is enough, and that we have what we need to do the things that God calls us to do. We have all we need to get through the struggles that are before us, whatever those things may be. We have what we need to get through all the dark places in our lives. This week, I was reminded so much of this idea of having enough. I was sitting in my office at work, and I heard a commotion outside my office door, and what I heard said was, no, our pastor isn't here, but we have a pastor here. And I'm like, okay. And I walked out, and what I found was a young man with completely bald, with tats, and with tears streaming down his face. And he had come to get someone to pray with him. He was going through some really dark times, some really tough times. And so I took a deep breath, And I said, God, I'm here. Let me know what I need to do. And so I took this young man aside and I talked with him. And he told me his story. I won't share his story with you today because it's his story. But he told me his story. And I did what I thought was just telling him all the right things, that you're not alone. That things will be okay. And then I said, you have what it takes to get through this. And he fell to his knees, folks, in front of me, with those tears streaming down his face, and he said, but I'm so afraid I don't have enough faith to do this. And I'm going, oh my gosh, how do I answer that? And I looked over on the wall for an answer, and there weren't any. And I looked over on this wall, and there was no answers. And then I said, okay, God, give me the words to say. And then I remembered the parable of the mustard seed. You see where I'm going with this. And I told him that you don't have to have great faith to get through the things that are hard. Because I've been studying this idea of God using the ordinary, the things that we already have. And I said to him, I said, if you have just a little faith, which I see that you do because you walked in these doors this morning, you have enough faith to move a mountain. And I understand that there's a huge mountain in front of you. But you have enough faith to move it. I'm not saying that things will turn out exactly like as you want them to be, because we all know that it doesn't turn out to be perfect, does it? Life is messy. I said, but I do tell you that you've got enough faith to walk in this door. And I'm going to tell you two more things. I'm going to tell you that you have enough faith to come in and talk to the pastor of this church. And set up times and talk with him and share your story. You have enough faith to do that. I know you do. You came in to talk to me today. And I said, and the other thing that you have is you have enough faith to come to church on Sunday. Which do you think would work best for you, the 8 o'clock or the 10:30 service? And he's like, I'll ask my wife. I don't know if he came to church there this morning. What I do know is that God can use whatever we can give him. That little boy's lunch was 5 barley loaves and 2 itty-bitty fish. And yet it fed 5,000. That's the miracle of Jesus. Not that everybody fed and they were all full. That's cool. But the miracle of Jesus is that he took the ordinary and he made it extraordinary. He took whatever that little boy had to offer. In the midst of that multitude of people, it was one little boy. And he took one little lunch, and it was enough, and then some. So when we are in a place where we're doubting, if we have enough, if we're the right kind of person, if we can make it in this world, I want you to remember that lunch and those sardine-sized fish and that mustard seed. I want you to remember the ordinary made extraordinary, the simple made beautiful, and that you yourself have everything you need to get through anything that life throws at you. But you need something. 2, you need the realization of whose you are. You need to talk to someone that can help you through. And you need to be around other believers. Those things. It's pretty simple. Really. It's a gift to be simple. It's a gift to be free. It's a gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in a place just right, it will be in the valley of love and delight. 'Tis the gift to have friends and a true friend to be. 'Tis the gift to think of others, not only think of me. And when we hear what others really think and really feel, then we'll all live together with a love that is real. May God help us and encourage us this day.